What's up YouTube, Dal here from DECKS FEB Games, and today I am bringing you a breakdown of my top 10 decks for the upcoming format post Photon Hypernova. That's right, new month, new set, new lot of decks to be testing out and competing at the highest level, including cash tierers. So, bar a ban list, these are the decks I feel are going to be doing the best. I've also got some demo deck lists, so shout outs to all of them. We'll be giving credit to their list. They're all from like the Grim Yugioh online post-Photon Hypernova tournament. There's a couple of lists that I've put together myself as well. They're also pretty much the standard list that you'd be looking for stuff like Flunderies and everything else. With all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe. Getting this video up to at least 50 likes in the first 24 hours will unlock a top 10 road decks. And trust me, some of the road decks are really fun and definitely worth looking into for this format. So let's start at the tail end of this list. So coming in at number 10, I'm personally putting Exosisters. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be like, the deck's pretty trash. That being said, the deck still performs really well, and what it does have is it has a very nice low ceiling of the amount of cards it needs to combo off. Like 2 cards gives it full combo. Throughout its combo, it has the ability of non-target banishes, it has the ability to dodge targeted effects, it then on top of that adds trap cards to the board, which allow you to kind of adapt everything that's going on. Now, against something like Flunderies, it may struggle, and against cash tierers, it can struggle as well. However, against tier elements, it is one of them decks that can utilise the D-Shifter in the main deck. It can also use D-Fissure as well. So it's got the ability to deal with cash deck, which I feel will be at the higher end of this list, bar a ban list, absolutely destroying the deck. On top of that, like I said, it requires minimal amount of cards in order to get going. It has the room to be playing as many hand traps as possible. Yes, some of the hand traps aren't as effective, but again, going into this format, as it is still fully untested, these are all just predictions of what's going to be going forward. And I feel that a deck like Exosisters can be slept on, because it's one of them ones that a lot of people feel, the mechanic is all about moving stuff in the graveyard. Unless I'm playing tier elements, I don't need to worry. But what a lot of people miss is the fact that it doesn't need to. You can actually bypass that restriction of the deck and not rely heavily on your opponent moving stuff from the graveyard, but in fact be setting yourself up with a Magnifica, and then as long as you know how to play the deck, can move into an OTK. The fact that it has front row and back row, even if it does get hit with something like a Droplet or a Lightning Storm or even a Shifter, it can still play around it. Now, obviously, if you put your monster in defense, the only thing you're really going to be taking out of a Lightning Storm will be their back row. And on top of that, it can swift quite easily into an OTK when you have the setup of Magnifica and constant searches and graveyard locks and everything else like that. Not to mention, I feel that Triple Tactic Frost might be quite good in the deck. And on top of that, you can also be looking at stuff like the White Bridge, can be pretty defensive and good for the deck. And it has a nice balance, like I said, between front row and back row. Moving into number 9 on this list. Now, number 9 on this, I feel it probably could be a lot higher, and I still want to see how it does in the cash tier matchups, especially when I expect you'll be playing stuff like Exosisters, Flunders, and of course cash tierers, all rocking and rolling that D-Shifter can be very painful. So, coming in at number 9, I have put Draco Slayers. Now, with Draco Slayers, I do feel that they are incredibly powerful. Quite like a lot of the previous Pendulum decks as well, they are put everything on the board and then play the game out. Yes, they have the ability to loop Ignister from the graveyard quite a few times, and the fact that Ignister is not a hard once per turn is absolutely insane. Non-target shuffle can be more powerful, if not pretty much the exact same as a banish, and being able to spin that card back really does kind of help you against stuff like cash tierers that they can recycle from banish or grave, and of course it does help from tier elements as well. So it does give you a very nice kind of balance and play around with everything you need, plus the fact that it does have a lot of consistency plays. The biggest issue with a deck like this is it's one of the ones that it puts on such an incredibly end board that if it does get broken, it's quite difficult to kind of work your way back to that. A lot of decks are only playing like 1 or 2 Ignisters, or are only going through 1 and then keeping 1 in reserve. So it's one of them ones where you burn through a lot of your extra deck and burn through a lot of your main deck, but the end board is very impressive and very powerful. The one thing that it will have going for it in the upcoming format is stuff like Dark Rulers isn't exactly the end-all be-all, especially if cash tierers do not get hit. Yes, Dark Ruler No More, when you're looking at side deck cards and stuff like that, is very good against Flunders, but then Flunders can start looping their board back around with their trap cards, so it's a card you might consider, okay, maybe I'm better off with an Imperm. Yes, something like an Imperm can stop the deck quite badly, because if you Imperm their Pendulum beyond the Pendulum, yes, they'll be paying 1200 life points. They won't be locked out of special summoning, which is great for them, but it will stop them getting the final scale they might need, or it might kind of hinder their plays. So it does weaken them, but again, it's not the end-all be-all, which is why it's kind of like the 9, and everything else above it, I'll explain why I feel they're slightly a bit better than the rest. So moving in to number 8, this one was kind of a toss-up between 8 and 7. So I've gone with number 8. I've been going into Dragon Link. Now the reason I put Dragon Link in here is quite like Draco Slayers, but they hold back a bit more consistency, and on top of that they do have all of the new Chaos cards which can help them out quite nicely. So like D-Link Chaos or D-Link Bysteals, everything like that I feel can be working really well in an upcoming format, and I do feel that it could even push it to a 60 card version if they really wanted to. Now what D-Link have that a lot of decks don't is they have the ability to play through so many hand traps, it's crazy. They can main deck something like Gamma, which is an incredibly powerful hand trap, unless of course you're facing against 2 elements. On top of that, their end board is very impressive and very powerful, so that something like a Dark World no more is required in order to stop them, to turn it off, and then try and break it and build it back from there. The issue is, if you're activating a Dark Ruler no more against something like Dragon Link, you can't kill them, and something that Dragon Link I have found through plenty of experience is very good at is coming back from the edge of death. That deck is incredibly powerful, it has ways of burning in time as well, it does take a lot of time to combo, so the right pilot with something like Dragon Link can do incredibly well, especially if in the upcoming format, let's say tier elements do get hit, and then you're looking at a majority stake of in the meta of something like Kashtira's and Flunders, you're probably going to be seeing less Bysteals, which means there's less effect to kind of deal with the Dragon Link deck. On top of that as well, I feel Bysteals might be a little bit pushed back, not massively because of Frosting. It's kind of like one of the best cards to be used in counter to a Bysteal, because it's like, yeah, okay, you can banish my card from the graveyard, but now I'm going to be able to add any spell or trap in my entire deck and then continue to play off. So very powerful, normal spell and trap, you don't mind. Very powerful card in the right matchups. So moving on down to number 7. So this is where it's a toss-up between 7 and 8. And I kind of went with Naturia. Now, personally, I haven't had as much experience with Naturia as Yugioh, playing it physically. But just knowing what it can do and how incredibly powerful it can be, it's one of them ones where you could arguably push it a little bit further back down the list, purely because it has that RNG factor. But when it has the control factors of being able to send the Sacred Trees, when it has the control factors of being able to lock the board down, control it and everything else alongside it, it can be a very powerful deck. Quite like Exo Sisters in 10th place and in 7th with this one as well, arguably you could also consider the Dragon Link. They can play very powerful Floodgates. Now obviously something like Naturia or Exo might have the bit of benefit of the edge because they can play something like Gozen, where Gozen is more effective against sometimes Flunders because they've got Waters and Winds, but more so Kashtira's, and then Rivalry is stronger against Tears. You can kind of see the balance with those Floodgates that yes, they're good, but how effective can they be? So that's why Naturia has kind of slid in here at number 7. Arguably could be number 8 as well. Like I said, I'm going to put demo deck lists up on the screen for you as well, so you can kind of see what they are. And I'll put the links in the description below as well, so you can take those away with you. Have a look at them, examine them, and if you fancy building them, you can test them out online and then change them as you see fit. Moving in to number 6. Now, number 6 is kind of a new deck that is a little bit untested, but it's already making very good waves. And that is like Mekanko Libromancers. Now, obviously, Gabriel Nets from the Disciples did do incredibly well, got top 4 with a 60 card new based version of this deck. And what makes the Mekanko so good with Libromancers is they're just very heavy on the gas engine. Now what we mean by that is they have a lot of cards that can just special summon themselves by revealing a ritual monster, and then what you do is you keep the Mekanko in the hand, you reveal everything you need to, you special summon the monsters out. They have the ability to main deck something like a Lava Golem and Ross Fear mode, which I highly expect we're going to be seeing high representation in the upcoming format as well. And off the back of that, the Mekanko being able to summon itself down and then bounce itself back to the hand during the end phase. It can protect with Archlord Christia if you see the Gabriel Nets version. The 40 card version that I've put up from Grim Yugioh as well, it kind of shows you the ability of being able to kind of take control of your opponent's monsters, protect your own monsters, flood the boards, go into synchro plays, go into XYZ plays, go into link plays, Diviner of the Herald, loop that around. It's just an incredibly powerful all-round deck that requires very little to get going, but it does require a combination of decent cards. Now, the reason this deck hasn't broken into the top 5 or gone further up, in my opinion, is for the pure fact that it's still a little bit untested, and I don't know how it's going to fare when it gets into the Kashtira format. We're still waiting on the post-Photon Hypernova. Like I said, this is the 1st of February. All we know is the leaks. We've seen a couple of predetermined builds for Kashtiras, predetermined plays, but the format will start to take shift, and once it does, I'll then be able to do an updated version of this video if you guys want to. The idea of this video is to provide you with as much information as possible, look at some of the decks on the top 10 list and go, okay, I've already got that, I want to build it, or, oh, I quite like their playstyle, I like that demo deck list, I'm going to go further forward with it. Moving in to number 5, now this deck just keeps getting stronger and stronger and more support, and that is of course branded. Now you can be playing branded Bystials, you can be playing just branded Despiers. I feel that with the brand new cards they've received in Photon Hypernova, they now have an ability to use fusion deployment not only for Albaz but also Cartesia as well. Cartesia is a very good, powerful on-board monster effect that will allow you to fuse, and that gives you more access to a Guardian Chimera. Not to mention the Bystials are still incredibly powerful. Now, like I said, versions with the Bystials might start to become more scarce if the Tier Element matchup becomes null and void. That being said, Tier Element, like I've said at the start, is already considered to be one of the strongest decks, bar a Banlist. That is the very big question that we have right now, is are we expecting a Banlist between now and the YCS? There's speculation that it could possibly happen in March, because then it would have meant that we would have had Cash Tierers and the full Photon Hypernova set for a month, and then they go, right, okay, this isn't quite healthy for the game, let's change it for the YCS. Or they're going to be like, okay, absolutely fine, we're going to keep it as it is, and we're going to see how it all comes out at the end of the YCS. Keep in mind, on the date of the YCS, we do have 3. I think there's one in North America, South America, and of course Europe as well, being in London. So I still feel that the brandings are incredibly powerful. It only develops even more. Like when they get future cards, they can start playing one-off power cards so they can really crush their deck down. It is incredibly powerful, very, very consistent. And the Bystials themselves just add a very powerful way of having strong boss monsters on the board while also being able to present themselves with a form of hand trap in the right matchup. Like I said, if the matchups shift and it doesn't really work because they are very ineffective against stuff like Cash Tierers and Flunders, the deck might start seeing itself drop further down this list, but the overall consistency, the power play, the non-target of Mirror Jade, the back row control elements of the deck as well, is just incredibly powerful and definitely something not to be slept on with the upcoming format and their new introductions of the 2 new fusion monsters and of course Starlight Mirror Jade, because you know we all know that normal Ultra Mirror Jade is non-target banish once every other turn, whereas Starlight Mirror Jade is banish every turn. That's a joke, guys, it isn't like that, but the deck looks very, very sexy in full-on max rarity. Okay, so now moving on to the top 4. Now, these are the top 4 that I expect anyone that is doing a list of top 4, top 5, top whatever is going to have these decks in here. It will all depend on the way that they kind of change the order about. Now, as a disclaimer, all of these versions that I'm about to mention to you, they're all going to be this deck and then any versions that spread off the back of it. So, for example, we'll start with number 4, and number 4 is, of course, going to be sprites. So when I mention sprites, I'm not only just talking about pure sprites themselves, we're also talking about Sprite Runic, we're also talking about Sprite Gishki, everything like that as well. The deck itself is incredibly powerful, it's very, very consistent, a lot of level 2s. Yes, they can kind of be taking a backseat when you're looking at Cash Tierers just constantly banishing their stuff. Their first board can be very, very painful, but the fact is their first board and their second board is just so consistent. Quite like the Mechanicos, they have a lot of gas going both first and second. It's very difficult to know exactly when to interrupt, when to stop them, depending on what else they have. Especially if they are then playing a hybrid version of something like the Runics or something like the not Cash Tierers, sorry, but something like the Bystials or of course the Gishkis, because they're just going to have different routes and options. And I feel that early doors post Photon Hypernova, if you are facing up against a Gishki version, you're going to be a little bit less equipped than if you were playing against normal sprites. So you'll try to interact with them as if they were normal, and then all of a sudden a Gishki card will drop down and you'll be like, whoa, where the hell did that come from? And that's where it will change the deck up a little bit and kind of cause a couple of different issues, but definitely a bit of variety in the deck and the format as well. Moving into number 3. Now number 3, again, it's really going to depend on a ban list. It's really going to depend where the format kind of changes and chops and swifts around and everything like that. But number 3, in my opinion, is Flunders. Flunders is one of them decks in the meta that is probably the cheapest to build and play and do incredibly well with. The one thing that it does have as its big nose is it's boring as. This deck is still incredibly powerful. If Barrier Statue does not get hit, being able to put a Barrier Statue down, if that wasn't bad enough, like Barrier Statue, you're kind of like, okay, all I've got to do is normal summon a monster and then punch over it. But it's like, now I've got to be able to get rid of their trap card and their field spell in the draw phase or standby phase before either of them can be activated, then normal summon, and then punch over the Barrier Statue. Like, it just requires you to have quite a lot, and the only way you get rid of 2 in the draw phase or standby phase is if you're playing Twin Twisters, which a lot of people aren't playing. So it's a very, very difficult way to kind of out that board break. Flunders will probably lose to themselves more than they'll lose to you as a player, purely because they'll leave a brick. And it's crazy that they brick when they're being able to play Pot of Prosperity and Pot of Duality, but it does happen. The fact of the matter is, as soon as you put down a Wind Barrier Statue, there's very specific cards that can out it and can deal with it, so it really does kind of trump a lot of the decks below this list, so from everything 4 up to 10 and onwards. Like Exo Sisters can't really special summon, they're all quite weak, so they can't really do a lot. Draco Slayers, yes, they can get Majesty Maiden on the board, but even then that might not be enough to kind of kill the game off and deal with the barrier statue if they've been able to get their full combos with Rises and Penguins and everything else along the board as well. So these are going in here, and the reason that the other two decks are above them is just for pure consistency. The fact that the Flanders don't have the greatest go second board, they're kind of lucky at the moment that not a lot of people are playing huge amounts of hand traps. But again, when you'll see in the demo deck list, one thing that is a staple across all of them is a lot of people are now going back to Infinite Impermanence. It's just an incredibly powerful card. Not only does it hit Kit Kalos, but it can hit one of the Flunder cards as well. It can also start dealing with the cash cards. It builds up and up and up and up, and that's what makes it incredibly powerful. Speaking of, let's move into number 2. Now, number 2, of course, is going to be the brand new, well, technically second wave of Cash Tirers. What this deck got in Photon Hypernova was absolutely insane. It got a huge amount of support, it got a huge amount of consistency, and Konami highlighted that by giving them 3 secrets, 1 Starlight Rare, and a couple of Ultras as well. This deck just went from, okay, rogue, slightly playable, to holy crap, it's almost near meta, and if something happens to tier elements and nothing happens to Cash Tier, this deck is going to be the new number 1. This deck is absolutely insane. The fact that their new boss monster is a walking, talking Macro Cosmo that has the ability to banish cards, recycle cards once per chain, not once per turn, and the ability to lock out either all 5 spell and trap zones or all 5 monster zones is pretty much a big get screwed if you are playing, okay, I'm not playing any back row, I'm not playing a lot of spells. So that's where stuff like the Book of Lunar Eclipse comes in, because one thing that a lot of people have learned is that with the Shangri-La will keep the zones locked as long as it stays face up on the field, even if it's negated. So even if you were to go draw phase, imperm, turn it off before it can special summon from the deck, it will still have whatever zones it is locked during their turn completely down and out. On top of that as well, what makes the deck incredibly powerful is it does have a very good go second board. It has the ability to constantly keep special summoning monsters from the hand as long as they control no monsters. So if they bring down a Fenrir and you go, whew, that's a bit dangerous, I'll get rid of that, they can just go, okay, cool, I'll special summon another one and another one. And a lot of decks are considering stuff like evenly matched, they're considering main decking stuff like Lava Golems, and like I said, Ras Modes, because they don't even need to use their normal summon. A lot of decks just go, cool, I control no monsters, special summon. Birth, special summon me another one. Rise Heart, special summon. Make Shangri-La. Banish a card face down. Shangri-La effect triggers. The additional Cash Tier that I've just summoned from the deck, turn that into a Rise Heart. Rise Heart is now a walking, talking Macro Cosmo. Hell, you know what? I'm going to add a Mind Hacker on board on that. I'm going to banish from your extra deck as well. So I'm going to make it even harder for you to kind of counteract that and go from there. I do highly expect that possibly a Reaper can be considered more side deck option for the upcoming format, considering that it now has a lot more targets. So you could be hitting stuff like Rise Heart, you could also be hitting stuff like Kit Kalos as well, Ru Kalos, anything like that you really want to be dealing with. And then if the meta starts changing, you've got Mirror Jades that you know your opponent's going to be playing multiples of, you've got Masquerade Dragons. Obviously you need the space in your extra deck, but that's where Flunders come into play. The reason Cash are above Flunders is that they do actually have a main deck wind monster that can be special summoned and can deal with that barrier statue, as it is a pain in the backside. So the deck is very, very powerful, very, very good. I wouldn't say that there is a reason that the second wave of support is like £400 to £450, making the deck total like about £600 to £700 in value. But if the deck lives up to its hype and does incredibly well and survives at least the first ban list, meaning that it probably won't get touched until the second ban list of the year, which you're probably looking around mid, close to Euros and everything else like that, it will be a force to be reckoned with. Moving in to number 1, that almighty, all-powerful number 1 deck. Now this deck will only stay here if a ban list does not wreck it to shreds, and that is of course Tier Elements. Now Tier Elements, quite like Cash Tiers, do have quite a few variants. They do have the ability to be played Tier Cash. They've also got Tier Shizu, which is the number 1 go-getter at this moment in time. The fact that it can go first mill your deck out, it can go second mill your deck out. If the format does shift to de-shifter.deck, yes, the deck might take a slight step back, but then I suppose that's probably where the deck will start adapting and being able to go, right, okay, what can I do to stop shifter? What can I do to play under shifter? I still have ways in order to get into something like a Baguska and slow the game down. I might even consider be playing stuff like Gammas. You've also got Triple Tactic Taskins, everything else like that in order to try and stop and protect and deal with the shifter. Other than that, if they go unmatched and unrivaled and you don't see shifting, considering it is a very specific hand trap, they can either A, mill your deck out, B, spin your stuff back from the graveyard that you might want to be using to do stuff with, or C, just in all overall, bring out a lot of very powerful fusion monsters that can negate, can spin back row that can protect on the negates, you name it, the deck's got it. It's incredibly powerful. They get a tier element cash tier that comes out, of course, in Photon Hypernova. Given a deck that doesn't really need a boost, another nice little boost. Obviously, all the fairy cards as well. It is very, very powerful and a very, very good deck. So I highly expect it to maintain the #1 spot, unless something drastically bad happens to the deck. And even then, when you look at the OCG list, the OCG have hit that deck quite a few times and hit the counter. I believe they've got like Havness reduced. They've also got some of the fairy cards reduced as well. The Shizu cards reduced as well. And it's still doing incredibly powerful things. So unless the TCG do something different on their ban list to cash tiers, sorry, not cash tiers, tier elements, it's definitely still going to be the #1 deck in my opinion. So that is pretty much it. My rundown from 10 to 1. Let me know if I've missed anything out. Let me know your thoughts on it. Now, I've tried to keep personal involvement out of this. Otherwise, Dark Magician would be #1, guys. Come on. Alongside Dark World's at #2. But you've got to be kind of realistic. I wanted to provide as much information as I could for you guys at home so that when you're moving into this upcoming format, when you're moving into this meta, you know exactly what you might need to play around with, what you can then build as a rogue option. And if you want to see my top 10 rogue options, like I said at the start of the video, get this video to 50 likes in the first 24 hours and I will bring that for you as well. But for now, as absolutely always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Do you have any questions at all, please put them in the comments down below. I will be more than happy to answer them and help you guys out as you move towards either your first locals, your first regional, or hopefully your YCS event as well. As absolutely always, guys, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.